Hello, good evening. This is Susan Kokinda with LaRouchePAC, bringing you another podcast with Brian Lantz on the importance of President Trump's Agenda 47. Welcome, Brian. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to be back.
Well, since our last podcast, which was 2 weeks ago, in which we pointed out that a couple of leading political figures who are supporters of President Trump, Congressman Ronnie Jackson from Texas and Kari Lake, began to put a focus on the importance of President Trump's Agenda 47 policies. But as we were preparing this podcast, something else came across our screen, which I think is an even more dramatic example of the fact that the enemy is beginning to figure out the importance of Trump's Agenda 47 policies, which, as we've made clear, represent a complete and total challenge to the entire globalist agenda, both economic and strategic as well. And in fact, today, President Trump reiterated his very strong warning about the danger of World War III emanating from the fact that a bunch of neocons, whether they're in office or vying for office like Ron DeSantis, are literally playing with fire in terms of their strategic approach. So Trump is very clear that his policies are a complete and total in-your-face challenge to the globalists. I think their policy up until now has largely been to try and ignore Agenda 47. But today, I think they realized they couldn't quite get away with that any longer. And I'm going to share the screen here. This is Salon magazine's headline. Be very afraid. Trump's Agenda 47 is no joke. And you notice this subhead, this is not a joke or funny. You should be very afraid of Trump's fascist agenda. And they go on to wax somewhat hysterical about Trump's policies, and they just keep throwing the name fascism around. Now, I think this might be a very good case of projection, because as we're going to discuss tonight, that adjective is much more appropriately applied to what the Biden presidency is actually trying to do. So what we want to do in this podcast is contrast the content and intention of President Trump's Agenda 47 policies with both the ridiculous claims and the actual intention of our avatar president, whom we fondly like to call Mussolini Joe. So recently, President Biden has been running around talking about Bidenomics. And in his speech in South Carolina the other day, he said, this is what it looks like across the country. Over 13 million new jobs since I've been elected to office, more jobs than any president has ever created in their first 2 years. Nearly 800,000 manufacturing jobs, including 14,000 in this state alone. Bill Clinton's former labor secretary had a piece as well in which he says, I don't get it. We've created 800,000 new manufacturing jobs. How come people aren't happy? So Brian, let's look at these claims of 800,000 new manufacturing jobs and 13 million new jobs. What's really going on here?
Oh yeah. This is the scripted big lie that, you know, the avatar is reading out, and I don't think many people believe it. First of all, because they look around them and they say, "I don't see it here." Let's break it down real quick. Let's take, first of all, manufacturing jobs. And I'm just going to use the Federal Reserve figures that they put out. They put them out all the time. Here we're putting up a chart here. Now, this is manufacturing, number of manufacturing jobs, employees, starting back in 1939, and then you go all the way over, to the right to 2023, to June of 2023. That's where you are, right over there. And you can see the dip just around 2020 when the COVID hit. Well, Trump had that manufacturing employment up to 12,825,000. That was just before COVID hit in the beginning of 2020. Okay, if you go over to June of 2023, the total of manufacturing jobs in June, that's last month, in the United States was 12,825,000 jobs. In other words, the actual increase was only 164,000 manufacturing jobs, including part-time jobs. So that's what Biden has produced, not 800,000. That's, to look at it, the rest is what's been clawed back by small businessmen, families struggling to get jobs, get back to work, produce, often under very difficult conditions. Small businesses, are undercapitalized, particularly coming out of COVID. This wasn't Biden. But further, this is also junk jobs. This is producing for solar and wind and batteries with subsidies of 30 to 40%, which are a net loss to the real economy. You're employing people with the equivalent of digging holes, but the result is you can only fill them back up halfway because of the net loss of resources and manpower when you compare what you get out and what you put in the first place. So it's a mess. And if you look then at the total workforce, this idea that Biden has produced 13 million jobs, at least 75 or so percent of that increase is actually the increase coming off of COVID. It's the recovery of the economy, bouncing back, if you will, clawing itself back. Again, no help to, as regarding Biden and the Biden administration. So if you take that away, and you can put up that second graph, this is from the House Budget Committee, doing a look at, a fact check, if you will, of the Biden figures. You see that if Trump had remained in office instead of Biden and continued the growth of jobs, a 5% growth rate, we would have expanded we would have 5 million more jobs, not 3.2 million jobs, just as an extrapolation, but it's worthwhile to keep in mind. And I would also add, look, with the Biden collective, we added 2 million new foreign-born workers, legally, green card workers, to the U.S. workforce just in 2022. Since Biden has come into office, more people have entered the workforce than he supposedly added, the 3.2 million, in fact, which he's added, could be said he added. So this is a totally fraudulent figure compared to what Trump was intent on in terms of building the U.S. back as a manufacturing superpower. This is piddly stuff. And then if you look at another figure that's out there, maybe some people have seen it, this idea that we've doubled investment in manufacturing construction. And I don't have a graph on that. It's really not necessary. The only areas that have expanded in terms of investment is into healthcare and into chips, into the production of chip facilities and otherwise batteries, EV battery factories. That's the only manufacturing. There's not an investment into steel mills, that registers, that's new. There's not any new investment into other areas of the physical economy. If you take wind, solar, and batteries and chips out of it, it's zilch. So there's no real doubling of manufacturing capacity in the United States. And since most of that is this kind of junk, what I'm calling junk, in terms of, like, for example, battery production. I mean, these are foreign companies coming to the United States from South Korea, Japan, Germany, etc., to build battery plants here in the United States. I mean, really, think about it. Anyway, this is cannibalism. We're taking what we have in terms of potential physical capacity of the United States and doing the equivalent of flushing it down the toilet. I think that's really important to keep in mind. And it's all being subsidized. It wouldn't even be built without 30 to 45% subsidies. That is under the Inflation Reduction Act. These battery plants, et cetera, qualify for 30 to 45% subsidies. Taxpayer money going for worthless, negative investment, really negative, entropic investment, taking out of our resources and future capacities.
I'd like to look at that a little bit more in terms of whether it's batteries, whether it's windmills, whether it's solar, because of course you get all of these absurd claims and you get this very simple-minded idea, well, wind is free and the sun is free and so on. But as we and increasingly many other people are documenting, it takes far, far, far more to produce the aluminum, whatever goes into solar, the rare materials, the rare materials that go into batteries and so on, then you're ever going to get the energy out. If you elaborate on that a little bit.
Well, I think we spoke about it a little bit in the last couple of our podcasts, but you're absolutely right. Even the Department of Energy has done studies reporting on this. You're going to use a lot of steel and concrete in building windmills. You do building solar facilities and so on. And then, of course, there's the rare earths, and they all come from abroad and are largely produced in a usable form in China, regardless of where they came from originally. So this doesn't add up. And as the DOE study showed, this was in 2015, this is a negative investment. This is less out than you're putting in terms of human and other resources. That's just to summarize. A windmill lasts maybe 20 years, 15, 20 years. The solar panels last 20 or 25 if they're not shattered by, hailstorms and so forth. You're not building a nuclear power plant can be built that lasts and can be retrofitted so it lasts more than 80 years. Which is a good thing, because the nuclear power plants here in Michigan, in this area that I'm in, are at least 60 years old. Yes. We've got a legacy that we're still depending on, and we can't depend on that legacy forever. We got to build back, on a big scale, as President Trump is emphasizing. And I'd say, look, the fact that we're not is already showing up, not only in terms of the power shortages, the energy shortages, brownouts threaten, blackouts threaten, and all this. We were never there before in the 1950s. We were never in that kind of situation, or 60s or 70s, but it's in the wages. Look, a car today, a car has increased in cost 18 times since 1960. Well, wages have only gone up 10 times. Housing has gone up even more. The point is, we've cannibalized our workforce, maintaining a certain patina, a certain shininess to certain objects and so on and so forth, which we're all supposed to look at and go gaga over. But the real reality is that the standard of living and the growth of our population is shrinking and all the rest. And, an example of this, just in terms of just to get a little further picture, wages have gone down 8% or more, 10% since Biden came into office. I mean, that's just drawing on the Dallas Federal Reserve figures from the end of 21 through the end of 22, roughly. I mean, just to get just as a sample figure, but people know this otherwise out there. But then think about, there's a piece in Bloomberg that was just out, Susan, just yesterday or today, used car dealers are the new masters of the universe. That's what it's titled. And it's saying that because used car sale prices statistically came down a bit in the last month, the stock market surged. The Federal Reserve may, in fact, not raise interest rates again, and so on and so. And as the writer points out, I mean, I think he's somewhat cynically pointing this out. The world revolves around the ups and downs of the U.S. used car lot market. But it's because people can't afford new cars. That's also the reason. They can't afford new cars, EV or otherwise. So, the used cars is where the market is today.
Well, this is having some very interesting political repercussions. The relatively new head of the United Auto Workers, Shawn Fain, announced back in March, and has announced it over and over again since then, that the UAW is withholding its endorsement of Biden. Yes. Because of this push for EVs. And he echoed, what you were just saying. He said, this is a race to the bottom in terms of wages. It's interesting. There was an article in The Intercept, which is a left-leaning publication, which is kind of freaked out over the fact that Biden is throwing away the Midwest because he's trying to move more and more to the Southeast, where you do have lower wages, where you do have much more of this green energy investment, and so on. On the cheap, yeah. And that he could be losing, politically, in the Midwest. And I think that's something which President Trump was very conscious of when he came here to Michigan a couple of weeks ago and spoke at the Oakland County Republican fundraising dinner, because he just went after the question of EVs. He gave a real lesson in the importance of tariffs, and made the point that union members, not their leadership, but union members by and large are looking toward his leadership. So we've looked at the fraud of what Biden is doing, and the implications of it, which is really this race to the bottom and driving people backward and cannibalizing your society for things which have a negative impact on your ability to move forward. And by the way, the ultimate political manifestation of that is called fascism, which is why we talk about Mussolini Joe Biden, because it's a very, very similar kind of policy. Donald Trump clearly has a very different intention. And while we've covered this in our previous podcasts, I think it would be important right now to just give people a broad brush of how President Trump's policies are the polar opposite of what Mussolini Joe is doing.
Yes, Susan, I agree. And as you know, I mean, President Trump is calling for a quantitative leap in the standards of household incomes across the United States. He's not saying that as pie in the sky. He's saying we're going to do that by building the United States back as a manufacturing superpower. He's led the way on nuclear energy and fusion research as well as saying we're going to drill, baby, drill in terms of oil and natural gas in the interim, right? We're going to do it simultaneously, but we're going to produce the energy we need, and we're going to build the manufacturing capacity, the advanced manufacturing capacity we need for the future. And then you have, besides fusion, you have this commitment with Project Artemis, the Artemis Project, to go to the moon and Mars and beyond. That's not Biden, that's President Trump. That's the science driver for science, for spinoffs into industry, to increasing productivity, all of this energizing, firing the imaginations, the creativity of our people. So this is entirely different than this insanity of CO2 plant food being the evil of the universe, and saying we all got to cut back, die in the summer, freeze in the winter, in the process of stopping, basically the earth from rotating or something. I mean, just to put it in a different way, look, contrast this to the Biden economy. The Biden economy is like going to Las Vegas. You go there with a certain amount of money on an average, you're going to come home with less. That's the Biden economy. It's just a gambling casino at best, but we know it's actually much worse than that, and it's rigged against the American people, with all these scams and scare stories and all the rest. So yeah, the American system, reviving the American system, as President Trump has said, farmers, industry, science, that's the future. Let's do it. And that's Agenda 47 as Trump is presenting it.
Well, I think when we put things in such stark contrast in terms of what Mussolini Joe is doing with his so-called Bidenomics versus this completely different approach to actually growing your economy, advancing the real standard of living, you can understand why Salon magazine flipped out today.
Yes.
In terms of, because they know that once people get wind of, understand clearly the stark difference between these two things, and are not going to be bamboozled by some manipulation of, economic figures in the week before the election, as we know the Biden crowd did going into the midterms. Once people get a sense of the substantive difference between these two outlooks, there's going to be no stopping them. So I'm not surprised that the other side is beginning to get a little nervous. And in future podcasts, we hope to make them even more nervous. So thanks for joining us, Brian. Good.
And I think we really have had an effect with our Agenda 47 podcast and all the work of LaRouchePAC. We can take some credit for that blow up at Salon. So yes, thank you very much, Susan.
Thank you. All right. We will see everybody again very soon with another discussion of that which terrifies the globalists, Agenda 47.
Good.
Thank you.